I'm Craig Lamolt. Tonight on Greater Boston, Massachusetts' housing market is rough across the board. But according to the new GBH News Commonwealth Beacon poll, it's especially hard for the state's Latino communities to access affordable housing. We'll break down the numbers. Then 2014 Boston Marathon winner Meb Keski will join me, 10 years from his historic first place finish. And ahead of Marathon Monday, we'll learn about the alternative 26.2 taking place this Saturday across the city. Housing is one of the state's biggest challenges, with rising prices making it harder than ever to find a place to rent, let alone buy. Right now in Massachusetts, only about half of all residents own their home, according to GBH News' new poll with Commonwealth Beacon, conducted by the Mass Inc. polling group. And for Black and brown communities, that number is even lower. Just 42% of Black residents and only a third of Latino residents own their homes in Massachusetts. To dig into that gap and what we can do about it, I'm joined by Andre Jones, Director of Community Engagement for Nuestra Comunidad, and Vanessa Calderon Rosado, CEO of Inquilinos Boricuas en Acción. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
So,
for having me.
Andre, can we start with you? Latino families make up the second largest racial group in Massachusetts. They're the fastest growing population in the state. But again, this new survey shows that they're far less likely to own homes than other residents. Why is that?
I think that there has to be additional study on how certain systemic factors impact Latinos specifically and differently. So for example, if in the real estate industry, there's not a diversity within the real estate industry in terms of Latinos within the brokerage and agent field, right? That would be an impediment actually to Hispanic prospective home buyers.
Sure, yeah.
You have the language. I think the other thing is that I think too much we look at the Latino population as monolithic, but there's different groups within the Latino population, right? From different countries, when they've been here, when their families came to the States varies. So they're not all positioned equally. So, as an affordable housing developer, working for an affordable housing developer, I think we need to, in partnership with the state and the city, look to see if we can't drill down that information even more so we access them where they are.
Okay. Vanessa, are there other reasons that you think that are contributing to this kind of gap?
Yeah, I think there are a number of factors, including what Andre mentioned. In addition to that, there's a clear lack of inventory and high cost of housing, and that affects everyone equally. We saw it in the poll that you conducted. But I also think that there are other systemic barriers for Latinos to come into home ownership, including, for example, job segregation. We know that many of our people in our communities are in service jobs, in low-paid entry-level jobs that do not, you would have, even if you're making a minimum wage per hour, you will not be able to own a home in Massachusetts where the market is so expensive. So that is the big barrier to start with. In addition, what we found with the families that we work with is also that many of our families do not necessarily understand credit, banking, financial paths to economic prosperity. So that's a big part of the work that we do, helping them build credit, being banked, create opportunities for savings, and really think about opportunities for workforce development so they can, move ahead from the entry-level minimum wage type of job. So those are things that really are factors. And like that, there are others, like Andre mentioned, the fact that, we are not monolithic. We have people from different countries. Some of them documented, some of them undocumented. That becomes another barrier to become a homeowner, depending on your citizenship or documentation status. Oftentimes also our families live in multi-generational households. And even if they have enough savings to buy a house, only the credit of the person that's going to go in the mortgage, that name is what's going to be counted, as opposed to the money that the family is pulling together from everyone who might be living in that household. So there is very layered and very nuanced. It's not the same, but I think all of these factors compounded really put our community at a disadvantage to become homeowners, and by becoming homeowners, build assets and build wealth, intergenerational wealth.
Right, okay. Andre, there's a housing crisis all over the state. What role do you think the zoning is playing in all of this, in terms of zoning of multifamily housing, making it easier for maybe first-time buyers, home buyers to get a place? Some communities are limiting that kind of zoning.
Yes, I mean, so it was the time not too long ago, well, decades, but still not that long ago, where the step to generational wealth was through a multifamily home. And, you know, what's Vanessa kind of highlighted this is that housing stock it's no longer exists, because those multifamily dwellings, like 3-family homes, are exceptionally expensive in Greater Boston, and they've become either condos or rented to students or that type of thing, and they've kind of been banned from zoning. Now, some municipalities are looking to allow multifamily homes again, right? But the suburbs play a big role. Boston, and through their leadership in the city, is doing a substantial amount, but the question still is open. The surrounding, Greater Boston, from a statistical management area, is a large area, and we all have to participate by loosening up the zoning. The zoning's very balkanized in Greater Boston.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Vanessa?
Yeah, it's a big problem, and that's one of the major factors that really prevents the development of more housing that is needed all across the state, and certainly the Greater Boston area. So obviously, laws like the MBTA Communities Act that is trying to push for communities to rezone, right, to build more multi-family housing in areas that are close to MBTA hubs and transportation nodes, is a big proposal, right, that happened in the Baker administration. Now the Healy administration is implementing. We all housing advocates believe that it's the right law, but we have seen across the state, especially in some communities like Milton, who have pushed back on that law and are challenging the law. So I think communities really have to understand that. And just recently, there was an article that was talking about young people are leaving the state because they cannot afford where to live.
Right,
and
right.
So we need to really, all of us, this is all hands on deck. We're all in this together. It's the prosperity of our state, it's the economic growth of our state that is at stake if we don't address the housing crisis. And one part of addressing it is really tackling zoning reform.
And Vanessa, there's been research by the UMass Donahue Institute that shows that people of color are more likely to be denied a mortgage or get less favorable mortgage terms. Can you speak to what's happening there and how we can address that?
Yes, I think Andre mentioned this, alluded to this at the beginning of this conversation. Clearly, there's still discrimination happening, and that continues to not only create segregation as people are able to access home ownership, but also it's pushes people to potentially financial products that are not beneficial to them in the long term, with potentially variable interest rates, et cetera. So that is still a problem. I think what Andre mentioned about diversifying the banking and mortgage industry, diversifying the appraisal industry. All those things are important because not only when it comes to Latinos, which is the population that we're focusing in today in this conversation, not only brings that cultural responsiveness and sensitivity, but also language, ability to communicate and to connect with those families. So we do know anecdotally that that type of discrimination is still happening.
Yeah.
And to the fact that we can bring more people of color, and in this particular case, Latinos, into these industries, a lot of that will continue to go away, to subside.
Okay. Andre, just the moment we have left, beyond diversifying those industries that Vanessa just mentioned, what else can and should happen to address this issue and to make it more able for people to buy homes?
One big area is that, as Vanessa knows, as an affordable housing developer, it is really hard to develop affordable home ownership. But we do. We do develop affordable home ownership. Because of fair housing law, though, you know, you have to give, to short shrift, you have to give everybody an equal shot at it. There's certain populations that are more astute at knowing what that system is and how to get into those lotteries and how to prepare for those lotteries. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to prepare our residents, which is majority Latino, by the way, trying to prepare them with first-time home buyer programs, trying to prepare them so they get their name into the lottery, so they have a better chance. But right now, there's some groups that are more able or astute to get into that process. We have to bring Latinos to that level where they are participating in the process so they can avail themselves of affordable ownership opportunities.
Such an important conversation, and there's so much more to say. We'll continue having it. Thank you so much. Andre Jones and Vanessa Calderon-Rosado, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
10 years ago, at the first Boston Marathon since the 2013 bombing, his win was seen as a symbol of hope and resilience. Meb Keski crossed the finish line in a stunning 2 hours, 8 minutes, and 37 seconds, becoming the first American man to win the race in over 30 years. Now, a decade on, he's gearing up to run the race again, with a different goal this time. Meb Keski joins me now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So that year when you won the Boston Marathon, you ran with the names of those who had died the year before written on your bib. Can you just take us through what it was like for you that day, crossing the finish line and knowing that you'd won the first year after that marathon bombing?
You know, coming to the 2014 Boston Marathon, the slogan was Boston Strong, and the city of Boston showed how strong they are with the catastrophic moment from the 2013. The lives and the limbs that we lost, you can't get them back. So in honor of the victims that passed away, Martin, Crystal, Sean, and Ling, I decided to write it. I think it was the night before. I was visualizing, I'm a believer, so I wanted to have a cross and then have their pictures on it, but then how am I going to take it out when I'm running? So I just decided to write with a Sharpie. I want to write bigger, but I was kind of consciousness of the sponsors also, how they're going to take it, not to tamper with the bib, but I wrote with a Sharpie, and I felt the spirit. You know, the city felt the spirit. They just wanted to show resilience to be able to come back on the streets of Boston, especially Boylston, among us 36,000 other participants. They wanted to do something positive to show that we cannot be stopped. We want to show the resilience to be able to come back stronger than before and to carry those names. I was hurting pretty bad, but I just kept praying in my native tongue, Tigrinya, or in English, to tell them, give me the spirit, give me the spirit. And it was a risky move that I did with 20 miles to go from the finish line that I took the lead, but it was well worth it. And I definitely feel like the spirit, and then there was higher. I'm a believer, so God was there to help me get to that finish line, and the crowd was just fascinating.
Yeah, it was an incredible finish, and you really put the gas on at the last minute there to pull ahead in the last 5 miles, right? I understand that when you crossed the finish line, one of the first things you did was rush to the family of Martin Richards, is that right?
Yeah, I was the first one to rush to my wife. She gave me a big hug, and actually the Martin Richard family were not in town, but they realized somebody called them to say, hey, they were on vacation because the memory of the marathon didn't serve them well. They didn't want to have to live through that. So they were on vacation, I believe. And they called them on their cell phone and said, hey, you might want to tune to the TV because there's an American in the lead and has your son's name on his bib. And then ever since they came. But as we got friends over the time, Denise and Bill were able to get the finish line. I kissed their hand to show respect. But also their son, Henry, also ran for my foundation, Meb Foundation, in New York last fall. So the friendship and the relationship is pretty strong.
And now, 10 years later, you're running the Boston Marathon again. Tell me about that and your foundation that you're running to support.
I don't know what I'm thinking, but I decided after running for Martin Richard Foundation and Team for Kids in New York, I decided that one day I want to do it for the Meb Foundation, which is maintaining excellent balance through health, education, and fitness to empower young kids. As 10 years later, I thought it would bring some attention to the Meb Foundation and do the good work that we do, whether it's scholarships or giving out shoes. And I'm so delighted to be partnering up with New Balance to give out shoes in the future for the next generation to inspire them. And so now, as I lace up the shoes on Monday, April 15, 2024, it's going to be tough hills, tough course, but at the same time, when you're doing it for a greater cause, it means so much more. And the training has been pretty solid. I look forward to representing the Meb Foundation and the best that I can. And there's 15 others that are running for the Meb Foundation and other charity runners that are trying to do greater cause other than themselves.
Terrific, great. I'm sure there are people watching who are planning on joining you on that race route on Monday. Any advice for runners out there who will be running alongside you?
The Boston Marathon is known to have a tough, hilly courses, but we do forget sometimes the slight downhill forces you to go faster. So I say put on your brakes on at the beginning for the first 5 miles and then start accelerating to the pace and goal you want to go. If you do that, coming over the Newton Hills, Heartbreak Hills, the downhill is pretty strong finish. It's a downhill finish, but you got to be able to have some energy and some gas to keep that momentum, the gravity take you down. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. The weather seems to be right. So just have fun, save something for the end.
All right. And I know that you're also throwing out the first pitch at Fenway on, is it Sunday, I guess? Have you been practicing your throws?
A little bit. I'm so excited for that to happen. I was very nervous, especially the first time I did after I won the 2014 Boston Marathon. But yeah, they've been inviting me a couple of times to be able to do the first pitch. Such a great honor. So right. I've been visualizing a little bit, so looking forward to do hopefully a good pitch.
Well, good luck with that and with this year's Boston Marathon. Meb Keski, thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Finally tonight, before tens of thousands run the 26.2 miles from Hopkinton to Copley Square in the 128th Boston Marathon on Monday, another group of runners will set off on Saturday for 26 Point True. It's an alternative marathon that aims to celebrate and amplify the city's diverse communities, with a course that passes through more than a dozen Boston neighborhoods. I'm joined now by Jean-Mike Remy, an assistant run coach with Ready, Set Marathon, and a member of the Pioneers Run Crew, the group behind 26 Point True. Thanks so much for joining me.
Absolute pleasure.
So tell me about 26 Point True. It's a very different course than the Boston Marathon, and that's a big part of the point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing is that it's actually in Boston, and I think for folks who are not from here, they wouldn't know that. The Boston Marathon, you spend maybe 3 miles in Boston versus 26 Point True, where we will be running the neighborhoods of Boston, Hyde Park, Jamaica Plain, South Boston, and actually experiencing our city.
I know part of your goal is making running more welcoming to communities of color, right? What is unwelcoming about the Boston Marathon?
The biggest thing is that it's not as inclusive as one would think. You start running, you're having a good time, and then you hear about this race, like, oh, okay, maybe I want to run the Boston Marathon. And then the more you find out, the more it becomes that like, oh, hold on. I either A, need to be mega fast. And if you are, awesome. There's still a cutoff time and buffers and this and that. So it's not as easy to get in as, hey, I'd like to run this, let me register. There are charity bibs, but even that's super competitive. And we don't all have extensive networks that can help you fundraise the $7,000, $8,000 necessary on top of training and doing all those things. So it just felt like there was enough space to have an alternate option for the people who wanted to run and see the city and couldn't. You know, you grow up in Boston and you'd never get a chance to run the Boston Marathon. Mm-hmm. You can still run through Boston.
You and I last spoke after last year's Boston Marathon, where there was an incident at mile 21 where members of the Pioneers Run Crew and Trailblazers were cheering for fans, and the Newton police responded because there was a complaint that members of your run crews were running along the marathon route. The president of the BAA apologized to the run crews after that, but has since also apologized to Newton Police more recently for how that incident was handled. I actually had a chance to speak to him just recently about this incident, and here's what he said.
We want the run crews, we want Pioneers and Trailblazers to be there in 2024 like they were there and have been there in past years. I have to ask that they cheer, everyone cheer, from the sidelines, as we ask everyone and anyone in each of the 8 cities and towns to do the same.
What do you think now about that incident and how it was handled, and will you be going to the Boston Marathon this year?
Well, I'll answer the second question. No, I will not. And there's a lot there. But I do appreciate that they can at least recognize that my biggest gripe was the inconsistency. So owning that you were not clear and it was not consistent, because I've been at different cheer zones in past years when I was not a runner, and hanging around BC, folks are drinking and unruly, and this is not the first time, people were on the course of a race, but that was the only time that I saw that kind of response, that I saw that kind of enforcement of people coming out or jumping in and celebrating with their friend that they've been waiting hours to see run, if it's their first marathon. We were out in Chicago, and very similar environment where we were celebrating, and it was all fair game. Nobody was impeding the runners, but celebrating with them. And, there was one police detail that was there and worked very well with us to manage things and clearly communicate, and gave us the tools to stay in lines. But that's not what happened on that day.
Okay. Let's talk, if we can, in the moment we have left, back about the 26-point true. How does this work? I mean, it's an unsanctioned race in that the roads are not closed down. How many runners are we talking about, and how do you actually run a marathon unsanctioned like that?
Yeah, so one of my early experiences with getting ready for my first marathon, there are all these training runs. We took a bus up to Framingham and ran into Back Bay. And so, no, you have to be careful about your road crossings. You're using the sidewalks, but, you've got safety in numbers. Just like as a cyclist, you would stay to the fringes and, watch out, pick your spots. That's how that's going to work. There are about 200, 250 runners. Some have traveled from far and wide to come on down. Super excited to see everybody on Saturday morning. But, it's really a less competitive race. So you can come out, run as you are. If you want to light it up and run your best race, great. If it's your very first time and you just want to see if you can do it, also great. So there's space for that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, everybody pin their ears back and let's see what you got.
Yeah.
in the future would love to see the event grow so that we could have a couple of major street crossings, be a little bit safer, a little bit more protected. But I'm just thrilled that there is another option and an opportunity to celebrate my city with others.
Great. Well, I know you're planning on running it, so good luck on Saturday. And John Mike Remy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight. But come back tomorrow for Talking Politics. Adam Riley will sit down with Attorney General Andrea Campbell about her efforts on college sports betting, the ongoing fight with Milton over the MBTA Communities Act, and more. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching. I'm Craig Lamalt. Good night.
Wait, did I just commit a crime? Hey folks, I'm Edgar B. Harwick III from GBH's Curiosity Desk, where you ask questions and I find answers. Today's question comes courtesy of Betty Davis from Gloucester, Massachusetts, who wants to know, is it in fact a crime to remove these labels? Now, you find these guys on pillows, mattresses, even a lot of winter coats, and the reason why is because you cannot see what is inside of those items. Now, today, pillows, for example, are usually stuffed with feathers or cotton or some kind of synthetic material. But according to Maggie Terry, back in the day, they put some pretty gnarly stuff in the stuffing.
I mean, it used to be years ago, they'd throw anything they wanted to into the bedding. Newspapers, dirty rags.
Horsehair, used hospital or hotel mattresses, corn husks.
Sweepings off the floor, part of their lunches, droppings, I mean, anything.
For starters, that's disgusting, and furthermore, it's dangerous and unhealthy. So today, a lot of states require these labels that tell you what is inside of the item. And it is against the law to remove them. Sort of. Retailers and manufacturers can be fined if they remove the labels, but once you buy it or I buy it, if you read closely, most of these end with the line, except by the consumer. So there you have it. Feel free to rip away. Don't forget to follow and tell us what you are curious about because, hey, I might just look into it for you. I'm Edgar B. Harwick III. Stay curious out there.
Tomorrow on Talking Politics, I'll talk with Attorney General Andrea Campbell about her lawsuit against the town of Milton, youth sports betting, and more. Plus, where Massachusetts voters stand on the presidential election from the new GBH News poll. Tomorrow at 7.
GBH